I'm John McElwee Miller. Dad was Reverend Robert Day Miller, who was born in Fairfax, Virginia. I think his birth certificate said Washington, D.C., but his family lived on a farm in Fairfax back when he was born, and I was born while he was at Union Theological Seminary in Richmond. He was second. His brother, Andrew Pickens Miller, is still living and is an attorney in Washington, D.C., former Attorney General of Virginia. I think my little brother, Francis Pickens Miller II, is the 10th generation Presbyterian or Church of Scotland minister. Of course, before we immigrated in the 16 and 1700s, they were ministers of the Church of Scotland, which became Presbyterian in the U.S. My memories from there are very good. Of course, I was a child, and so I didn't understand a lot of the traumatic stuff that went on, and had the good fortune to go to St. Petersburg, where we had an integrated church and this halcyon childhood of peace and love and brotherhood. And I say Jesus freak hippie kids from Eckerd College. It was Florida Presbyterian then, and so we just had this fantastic childhood. But of course, I've learned a lot about what happened in Tuskegee, and I participated and was told about my participation in some of the stories. So I do remember very clearly things from. And
But he didn't do that.
He didn't, because they never burned a cross in our yard, so it could have ever happened. But that's part of the lore that grew out of that era. When other people were being killed, white people and black people alike were being killed in Alabama at that time. So I think that his peacefulness may have grown out of I know that you interviewed Mom and Dad about his serving communion to the two professors from Tuskegee Institute. I believe I'm correct that one was African American, one Caucasian. But it didn't matter, because nobody sat on their pew and nobody served them the bread. Henry Neal Seacrest, I believe, served the wine or grape juice, right? And but Dad said that when he left church after that, there was a gathering, and he assumed them to be Klansmen. And they wanted to confront him, and he declined. He thought, I'm not going to confront them. So he turned his back. He walked to his car, and he said that at that moment he said to God, if it's my time, take me now. And he was not shot in the back that day. In fact, as you know, lived to be 81 years old and was never shot. There was a Klansman, which I think a lot of the town were, the white town people were Klansmen, who had a drinking problem, and he would get into his drinks, and then he would call our house on the telephone and make threats, and he would threaten that he was going to come over and kill Mom, me, Dad, my sisters. And one night he did it repetitively, and so Dad believed it was that he might have been drunk enough to actually come with a gun to the house. So Dad had a double-barrel shotgun, and he crawled up on the roof. And he stayed the night on the roof and made the decision that the first shell was going over the guy's head. And that's how he always ended that story. Fortunately, the guy never came. And so Dad wasn't put to the test. He didn't have to fire, but he, at that point, had made the decision that if that guy were going to try to murder us, that Dad was going to fight back. I think at that point, and knowing my dad, he was calm, because he was concerned for all of us. But my grandfather had a famous quote about life is rarely black and white, it's all shades of gray. But Dad saw things in a very black and white, right and wrong. Of course there are gray areas, of course, but when he knew something was right, he acted on it. And I think once he made up his mind to act, he was probably he's just acting out the role that he'd already decided to take. And I'll tell you, this is, I think you've heard this story, but toward the end of Dad's life, we sat and had a nice chat just upstairs. Kind of went over his life's work in Rewind. And after we ended up with the communion and the death threats and all that went on in Tuskegee, I looked at him, I said, Dad, you set the bar pretty high for all of us, And he leaned up and, he had the gray beard set it pretty damn high for myself. At 27, and he always tried to live up to that. In his last ministry, his last large ministry in Louisville, he was run out of town for allowing a homosexual man to read the Bible from the pulpit, to read the liturgy. And so it's really circular. I mean, this is what Dad did. He just saw people as people.